Welcome everyone at 6 o'clock. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at the Bennington Public Schools Board of Education on this November 11th. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our meeting this evening is governed by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act, a copy of which is located on the south wall. Jody has verified publication and notification of our meeting this evening, so thank you, Jody. We'll begin our meeting this evening with, like we always do, with our public comments section or public forum. So if you're interested in speaking to the board, we have these gold sheets in the back of the room, so I encourage you to grab one of those and come up and deliver them to Jody up here. She'll be happy to take them for you. Just a few ground rules for us, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. The time limit is 5 minutes, so this is our board meeting. We're trying to take feedback from the community, obviously, but we do have business to do this evening, so trying to be fair and let everybody speak for 5 minutes. Please refrain from discussing personnel or student topics. Those will be addressed by administration at a later date. And lastly, if we call your name, will you please come forward and state your name and address. First up is Carol. Stacy's going to handle our clock, so I don't have to wave at you. So it's like the countdown behind me.
I'll watch right behind you.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm staring at you all the time.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. Welcome.
Carol Dussel, Cerny. My questions, and they might be answered again while things are going through. I read, I'm just looking at the bond information that was in there. In one place it talked about reducing the levy and one about levy neutrality. And I just want to be sure I'm understanding that would mean that we want to build the school but not have the tax go up. And I'm not quite sure how the two of those go together. Because I think that's what kind of got us in the mess that we're in, where we can't get one passed because people don't like the level of debt. So I'm curious just to see what exactly that means, or if my interpretation of that is wrong. But I am glad to see like a survey going out. I don't know if we're going to get any new information, but I think giving people's input is a positive thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol. And next up is Bob. Oh, I saw him here. Oh, yes. Welcome, Bob. Timer is behind me. Yes.
So, good evening all, and Allison, thank you for recognizing Veterans Day, and to all the vets out there. Thank you for the selfless sacrifice you've given to this great nation. Just so I want to talk just quickly on the any future bonds. I do ask, as I've come before the board before, for a very open, transparent process. Hopefully it's not short and fast where folks feel like they didn't have an opportunity to participate, to try to help come up with creative solutions. Because I think everyone is all in favor for providing the best education for our kids, but also to be tied to the fiscal realities that we do live in, especially for those on fixed income, retirees, et cetera. I would, as I was thinking about this, what type of creative solutions are out there, especially, with the challenge of the student growth population as you have projected, and how do we remove or alleviate some of that pressure. And again, I acknowledge I don't know the rules and laws or statutes that it would be under, but is there an opportunity through a school lottery or something to offer parents the opportunity to the homeschool, charter school, or private school, to offload the pressure, somehow either give back their property taxes or Bennington funds that. But if the end state is the best education possible for the parents, does it matter who is providing that education, and is it a win-win? It'd probably be cheaper to allow parents to send their kids to another institution if that was available. It'd probably be cheaper than building a new brick and mortar schoolhouse or schools. And it would be a win, again, best education for the kids, parents' choice, and then also we keep our taxes as low as possible. So just some thoughts. On the survey that's going to go out that Carolyn just mentioned, I would ask, please reconsider who you're doing and the number of folks that you're targeting. I think the last couple times we surveyed 4% of the taxpayers, and that is woefully inadequate. I think we should strive for 75% or better if you truly want the voice and to try to avoid having bias or misleading questions. And I know it can be on both sides, but there were a number of questions as we go back and you're like I used this example before, but hey, you want a free trip to Europe? Absolutely, you gotta pay for it. Let me think about it. So I would say, please, when you're designing this, look hard at who you're asking. And to be honest, I can help you, I do surveys too. There's a bunch of free things out there that we could maybe help keep some of our funds within the district by volunteer help. And with that, I thank you all. I know everyone is trying their best. Doctor, I appreciate, you taking the time and what you're facing, so thank you. And again, happy Veterans Day to all. Thank you, Allison and the board.
Thanks,
All
Bob.
right, did anybody come in late that would like to address the board? Old papers in the back. Right. Hearing none, that brings us to the first item of our agenda for this evening, which is the consent agenda. This would include approval of our agenda, approval of the minutes of the Monday, October 14th regular board meeting, presentation of our November bills for approval of payment, as well as our personnel report. I believe Steve and I had bill review this month, and I would note for the board, the stand-up aerator is on there. I think we discussed that in the local plans. I believe the board approved that as well, so that was purchased and did come through. Otherwise, it was pretty typical for this month.
Yeah.
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I just, when I saw the aeration and seating equipment, I did go online and check pricing, and all the pricing I found was higher than what we paid, so we did a good job of saving the district money. I did see a note, a hammock camping chair for $110. I'm not sure what that was used for or what that would be purchased for.
What's that?
Yeah,
This is similar, you know.
yeah, it
Thank
was
you.
for a student need at one of our elementary schools for us to have the gym some significant training. So
Gotcha.
just to.
Makes sense. Perfect, thank you.
I don't know if everybody could hear online, but that was for a student need for special education services. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's all I had. So, thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I believe there's a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Christy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jody, call roll.
Kara,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes,
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Christie.
Yes.
motion passes. That brings us to our reports and presentations section of our board meeting, and we'll begin with Ms. Woodbridge from Heritage.
Good evening. Ms. Woodridge, principal at Heritage Elementary. The first thing that I wanted to highlight for our elementary buildings was just our fall parent-teacher conferences. And I really just wanted to note the amazing attendance we had from all of our families. And as you look, we had from anywhere from 96% to 99% of our families showing up. And it really just shows the investment of all of our families in their child's education. The nice thing is all of our teachers do reach out to any families that are unable to make conferences just to make sure that we still make that connection with all of those parents as well. The next thing I wanted to point out was our Red Ribbon Week, and our students had fun celebrating this just through different themes, from Career Day to Mixed Up Day, where our teachers dressed as students dressed up as teachers, Western Days, students had a great time, and to be honest, our teachers had just as much fun with this week. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight for you is just our Halloween parties. We had trunk or treat and parades as well. With this day, I really wanted to say thank you to our PTO and all of our volunteers. One thing we know in our elementary buildings and all of our buildings, it takes a village. And these days could not be possible without all of them, so it was very successful. Does anybody have questions?
Thank you. All right, next up is our middle school report. Mrs. Rucker.
Hello, I'm Renee Rucker, principal at Bennington Middle School. The first thing I want to highlight tonight is the Veterans Day program that we hosted today. It was an amazing experience. Our choir and our band performed together the national anthem. Officer Raymaker, he spent some time talking to our community members and our students and shared his own experience as well as the importance of Veterans Day. Kids were able to ask questions. We really had a pretty good turnout, I thought, of community members that I didn't count per se, but we had like 40 or 50 people from the community. It was just a great experience. The other thing I'm also going to note is our fall conferences. Middle school numbers are never quite as high as elementary. You'll even see by our grade level, sixth grade definitely higher in both buildings than seventh and eighth grade. Really what we're hoping always to do is to build that home to school connection. We do communicate a lot through the year. We're still working on trying to find ways to get, more seventh and eighth grade families in the building. We're always open to suggestions. Questions for me at all?
Thank you. All right, Dr. Lamberty with our high school report.
Dr. Greg Lamberty, Bennington High School principal. A few highlights from our reports. First off, I would like to thank Mrs. Rucker and Bennington Middle School for the program that they put on this morning. That was actually supposed to be us, but due to logisticals, parking, using the gym, the setup, the takedown, we just felt like it was something we were going to be squashed with, and it wasn't going to be the quality that it needed to be. So Renee and her staff jumped on that and provided the opportunity at her building. So thank you to Bennington Middle School. Bennington High School rocked 25% attendance on our parent-teacher conferences. So that's the highest it's been since prior to COVID. All kidding aside, we do feel like we get pretty good communication throughout the semester with parents. We're getting emphasis online, the response to emails, phone calls, those types of things, I think, and off a lot of the parent-teacher conference time in October. A couple of events coming up for us at the high school. Next Tuesday, 7 o'clock, the play production one-act performance is the home performance, 7 o'clock. So that's free admission. It's about a 30-minute show. Be a great way for the district, our fellow students and our community come out and support that event. And then, we are transitioning out of the fall sports. We still have our football team playing, but our winter sports will start a week from Monday. And by the time we will reconvene for the December board meeting, we'll have already hosted a wrestling invites and multiple home basketball games. So kind of a transition month for us. Questions I can answer?
So thank you.
Thank you.
Really quick, Dr. Lamberty's point, but if you remember last year, I was trying to look it up, I couldn't find it, February, March, January, at some point we reported out on our communication survey that we sent out, to parents, and within the high school, I think it was like 80 or 90 is really incredibly high percentage of parents that said they thought they were well communicated with. And so to his point, between NEPSIS and communications throughout the year, the teacher conference is what it is.
Mr. Bombeck, you know the order, right?
Dan Bombeck, Director of Student Services. Tonight I wanted to highlight the October state report for special education numbers. So these are the numbers that we look at that are the official numbers going in to NDE to tell us what are we looking at for at least the first part of the year. These are updated monthly, but really we have 2 reports during the year that kind of have that big count on them. That's going to be October and then our June report later in the year. For the most part, you can see the numbers trend up, and that's to be expected. We have a couple anomalies in there with Anchor Point. One of the unique things about our state reporting is we have to attach a kid to a school, so it doesn't matter what program they're in. So Anchor Point has the privilege of housing our birth to 3, our preschool, and our resource students that attend Legacy. So those numbers tend to fluctuate a little bit more just based on those early childhood programs and that outside program Legacy services there. Stratford Elementary also houses our students for speech language that attend Legacy. And that kind of is our biggest pieces that we have from outside the program. The other thing I'd like to kind of talk about a little bit is just assistive technology. This is a program that we're obligated to offer. We are required to consider it for every IEP that runs through the district. These are going to be services like most people think about these as services that revolve around devices that talk for students in cases. Provo to Go is one of those that might be used so the student has a voice when they can't talk for themselves. But this also is considered in pencil grips and things of that nature, calculators for math. Those are all assistive technology related devices that students use in order to be able to function throughout the day in some cases. So this is just a little bit of information about what that programming is, and what we're hoping to do with that as we look in the future. Any questions for me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Feeney, are you going to do our curriculum instruction assessment report?
Yeah.
Oh, I skipped over, sorry, Dr. Bloom, yeah.
That's
We'll
right.
switch it up. I'm just
Save
keeping
the
you all
best
on
for
your
last.
toes.
Yeah, you're all good. All good. Jimmy Feeney, Director of here. Kind of have three things for you. The first one is the curriculum and personnel proposal process. Going through that for the first time, it was such a great process, for sake of a better word. We had 40 proposals this year, 29 administrators and teachers sat down. And it was really neat to hear everybody's passion for their programs, their advocacy for students, and to see everything in one place with kind of that common language of how we're going to analyze those and make some determinations for the next year. So I think the biggest challenge now is those future meetings, determining which ones you're able to honor and which ones you aren't. But Dr. Tyndall did a really wonderful job of leading us through that and communicating that with, across the district in small groups and whole group. So thank you to her for that. From an assessment standpoint, we're trying to give a consistent message to everybody that what we're doing now as far as our required testing. So in the state of Nebraska, you have to have a norm reference test, which is kind of that percentile rating for each student, and you have to have a criterion reference test, which is to your standards. So how do they do compared to the standards in Nebraska? We right now will satisfy both those requirements with NSCAS growth. The state did adopt the request for proposal from NWA, which offers a different model than it's had in the past. So I referenced to this a couple months ago that our assessment adoption team has wonderful timing. We would have to be making decisions on this year anyway. So what we've been able to do is kind of go through those rules and regulations, talk about some best practice, and really consider how do we want these new models to fit into what we call a balanced assessment system. So how are we gonna analyze our kids for learning and of learning? So as you look through that model, I'd love to give you some details about some of the discussions we're having, but to be honest, that would be putting the cart before the horse. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like because the state hasn't given that to us yet. So throughout the year, we'll consider that with our assessment team, but a great jump on that adoption, kind of setting the deck for those decisions. And then the last one's real brief, just an AQuest release is coming, just as in previous years, that day before Thanksgiving break will be the release date, unless NDE ends up delaying that, which has happened. We're getting into winter testing after break, and you'll see kind of some general guidelines for what we're doing with our early release dates, as well as starting to plan our select session for teachers when they return. Any questions I can answer?
I do have a quick question. So on the map growth in the option 1 and 2, is that now NSCAS and we're just saying map, or are we still doing map testing?
Well, map testing we do K2 right now.
Okay.
NSCAS was designed to be the state standards test as well as an adaptive test, which is map. So when you take the map assessment, if you get a question correct, it's a little bit harder. When you get it incorrect, it's a little bit easier to find your instructional level. NSCAS is technically supposed to do both. And I think they're finding that some of the limitations of NSCAS growth, they didn't want to offer that again 3 times a year. So the state will pay for that map testing through 3rd through 8th is what we're being told, should districts choose to use that. So that is a choice we have.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys are discussing now and deciding we're gonna do that?
Yeah, if you look in the spring section, that's the part that we really need some clarity on before you make a decision of what's going to best serve our students. So there is some perks to, all of the different things you see up there. So that's what we went away.
Thank you.
I think my only question or comment was, I know it's always confusing to families and students when we shift gears on testing and they're trying to compare previous to current. And so just how we're gonna navigate explaining the difference between the assessment results would be helpful.
Yeah.
Which is, I know, on your radar, but.
No, and that's where you hope you know what NDE's plans are, what the reporting suites. That's something behind the scenes we're asking a lot about. It's from like the curriculum standpoint, is what do the reports look like? Because right now, we hope there's some similarity.
Right.
So
that they can. So
Yeah.
growth can be noticed.
good news is those progress reports that you take home are actually from the map reporting suite, not the NSCAS part. So that is a perk that hopefully can stay the same, but we'll know more this spring.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Blumenkamp, sorry to skip over you.
Okay, Matt Blumenkamp, Assistant Superintendent in Bennington here. Hiring season is starting to ramp up. So from the Office of the Human Resources Department, try to send out consistently. A few years ago, Bennington Education Association came to us and said, we would ask that you provide a little more transparency, provide more updates on what positions are open in the district and when they come open. It gives us an opportunity if we have some staff that are interested in applying for transferring, can we do that and what's the process for that? So I worked with BEA to create a process to do this, and so consistently throughout the course of the year, as we have positions that come available, whether they're through the triggers, which are on the board agenda for later tonight, or it's from resignations, or it's from retirements, people moving, so on and so forth, that we provide those job opportunities to our staff. And so as I wrote this report last Wednesday and submitted it, these were the positions that were available in the district. That has been added to since that time, as we've had some retirements that have come through with Bennington. But through that process, we've had quite a few people that have applied for transfers. And last year, we were able to transfer 14 staff members in Bennington Public Schools, whether that's a transfer within a building from one grade to another grade, or that's from one elementary building to another elementary building, or from an elementary building to a middle school position, or a position where we had a classroom teacher that interviewed and transferred into a counseling position. So want to continue to work on that with staff and with BEA to provide those opportunities for our staff to be able to have those opportunities to make those transfers when they come available. So that's all I have. I'll be back up in a little bit to talk about some district purchases. But I did go to a job fair at UNL earlier this month. I had an opportunity to visit with prospective student teachers for the spring semester of this year, and had an opportunity to talk to quite a few elementary education students that are student teaching now that are looking for jobs for next year. So we hope that helps as we start to look for elementary positions.
How many practicum and internship students do we have? I know we put together a program or approved some.
When you say practicum or internship, like student teachers,
Yes.
we have,
Teachers.
I think we have 2 this semester, and I believe we have 3 scheduled for second semester.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have them from all over, not very often from out of state, but generally Lincoln, Kearney, UNO, Midland, Wayne State. That's generally where they come from.
Are we able to keep them usually if we want to?
So we do, that is one thing that I say at job fairs a lot of times. One of the things about Bennington is we like to get you here and teach you the way we like things done. And then we want to keep you. And so, yes, that's one of the things I highlight. As a school district that is growing, if you come to us and you work with us as a student teacher, often there's an opportunity for you as far as a teaching position when you come here. And so, yeah, we are able to place student teachers. We did place some student teachers last year in classrooms this year as employees of Bennington Public Schools.
One new unique dynamic when it comes to student teachers is districts that are paying student teachers. And so it depends on which district. There are some like us that don't have the ability to do that. There are others that are paying, $2,000 to $3,000 and some up to $9,000. And so that has become a little bit more competitive just to get people in the door than it has in previous years.
Couple quick questions on polling places. I did see something on the news today about safety concerns also at schools.
Yep.
That has been my concern
Sure.
since we've been having them.
Yeah, it was ours as well. Visited with the principals, had a chance to talk to Deputy Raymaker, our school resource officer, prior to last Tuesday, and said, would appreciate maybe some more police presence at our polling sites. We have 3 polling sites at 3 elementary schools. He's agreed with that and reached out to his colleagues at Douglas County, and we're able to provide more police presence at each of the polling places. But absolutely was congested. It's hard to have school on an election day. It's something that we need to probably look at and are going to look at in the future, particularly in a presidential election, on whether, as we host in our school buildings, whether it's in an elementary school or at times it's been at Bennington High School, Will we need to look at that as not being a school day or being a school day for our kids? Other school districts, some hold school on those days and others say that's a day off. It's too disruptive. And so we've already talked about that with our building principals about, in 4 years, we need to entertain a conversation with the school board at that time about whether that is a day that we have school or don't. But I agree, the safety was a concern of ours also.
Because I'm not in any of those schools ready to vote or nothing, but are the kids like literally around the people?
No.
Okay.
No, they're in the gymnasiums and the gymnasiums are locked off to the rest of the school. And so there is no interaction between the people that are coming in to vote and the people that are working the polling sites and our students.
Good. Thank you.
You bet.
One quick item of note on that one, just so we're all on the same page. If you receive federal funds, you get told if you're gonna be at a polling location, so you don't ask to do it, you don't get an option, you get told if you're going to be one or not.
Which I have no problem, just want to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. We've had to see people just say, can we just tell them no, and the answer is no.
Other questions I can answer? Thank you.
All right, next up is our superintendent report.
Okay, kicking off with talking a little bit about a bond issue update. The district has continued to develop and look at potential proposal for a second high school. So far, both the building and finance and the curriculum committee have had the opportunity to provide a little bit of feedback on a proposal. We're probably at the point where we need to start branching out and seeking some public input on that. And so looking at some feedback groups, looking at doing a survey that would go out to everybody in the district that we have an address for, sending a postcard out and hopefully getting everybody's responses. It's our plan to try to learn as much as we can about our community's feelings and beliefs, and hopefully bring that back to you before you make a final decision so you're able to analyze those results as well. One thing that we're going to definitely focus on is those 3 areas that we keep seeing in all the surveys that we've done. That's lower the levy, reduce the bond debt, and then improve communication. So there will be questions on each of those just to ensure that we're hitting those as well. One thing just to note, obviously we have an incoming board member with Joe Pick, and so did also go through some stuff with him just to ensure we have a smooth transition and no surprises in January as that transition takes place. Questions on that topic? Okay. Second one is just kind of an update on the last meeting. We had the bond tender redemption timeline. As we talked about doing the cash tendering of the bonds, there was a question whether the board could see those prior to and approve them on an individual basis. And we talked about maybe having a special meeting to do that. Ultimately, you guys did want to move forward with that option as it could save us up to $1 million within our bond debt, where a traditional early call would be under $500,000. And so it was worth the opportunity to do that. But we just adjusted the timeline that way we don't have to call a special meeting. And so those will go out for a tender offer on November 22nd. They'll expire on December 9th. We will come for a regular meeting on December 11th, and then you guys can review that during the regular meeting. Then they can settle and close on those if you so choose on the 13th. So no need for a special meeting. We just adjusted the timeline. Questions there? All right. Health insurance rates. It's that time of year where we receive our rates from the Educators Health Alliance. A reminder, the Educators Health Alliance, or EHA, is the health insurance group that represents almost every educator in the state of Nebraska, other than I think 2, maybe 3 districts in the entire state. It's 90,000 people. It's the largest health insurance pool in the entire state of Nebraska, run by Blue Cross Blue Shield. It is a collective group on the board of NASB, NCSA, and NSEA. So it's really a cool collaboration as they work through with Blue Cross Blue Shield, covering over 90,000 people. This year, the overall increase was 5.49%. And so last year was 1.99, very low. This year is probably somewhere in the middle there at that 5.49%. That's been communicated obviously with our negotiations committee, as that's a huge part of our teacher settlement packages, as well as BEA, and we're all working off that same information. Okay, next thing I had up there is just the valuation information. It's that time of year where we start to receive valuation information from the different segments that we have for breakdown. Provided the last 5 years, I'll probably do this every year just so we keep a tab on it as a collective group and make sure we all understand how our valuations are trending. As you look at this, a couple things to keep in mind. The average commercial valuation is around 15% statewide. It's a little higher in the metro, but as an average in the state, about 15%. Ag is typically about 33%, again, a little lower in the metro. And so looking at Bennington and how we've trended, we did have, I don't know, I think what I generally hear from people would be a positive trend as we continue to hear concerns about the amount of valuation for commercial and industrial within our school districts. Just the way that our district is populated, you know, a huge portion of our property taxes are paid by residents in residential neighborhoods. And so we have had the third year, or second year in a row of a reduction in the residential property. And so it was a decent reduction this year from 91.44 to 89.97, which is the lowest we've been in 4 years. What I thought was interesting is the commercial and industrial. It jumped up from 4.37 up to 6.07. We've never been above 5, much less above 6. And so there was that trend that, you know, of the commercial industrial to increase a little bit this year. Obviously, it's good to see us at least going in the right direction. I think I said this last year, it will not happen overnight. It doesn't matter, you know, as commercial comes in, it is going to be a slow drip. I always look to Gretna. And so if you kind of go down a little bit, you can see some of the commercial valuations throughout the metropolitan area. You can scroll down a little bit, see some things. Gretna, you drive through Gretna, it is got commercial everywhere. I mean, you go through 204th and down through the town there, it has just really exploded over the last 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And they're still at 12%. And so Bennington obviously is going to start trending in that direction just as we see more people. There's obviously need more of commercial and industry, but it is not going to be an overnight thing. What we hopefully will see is what we saw from last year to this year, at least a slow drip of that percentage increasing. So, but on that bottom, you can kind of see some of the some different areas within the metro and what that looks like for commercial valuation for them. Most generally in the metro, you fall between that 20 and 25%. Obviously, Ralston's a little bit of an outlier at 50, and we're a little bit of an outlier at 6. And so you can see the tailwinds on that as well. Questions? All right, last thing I have, don't cut me off, else I can see it, you want me to be done.
Trying to keep it up.
I know. Our free and reduced percentages, again, I would like to update you on in November. We had a fairly dramatic reduction within our free and reduced population this year from 14.58% down to 11%, a reduction of about 132 students. Most of that is due to adjustments in the direct certification for free and reduced because of the expiration of some COVID era waivers. And so if you were a Medicaid participant, you automatically were allowed to be on free and reduced lunch. That's been taking place for 2, 3, 4 years since COVID happened. Those ended, and so then you had to actually apply. And so we had a reduction. When that was, when that provision was ending, we did communicate with families, make sure that they knew. And so with the reduction, either families didn't qualify anymore or, you know, didn't want to fill out the paperwork. One of those two things happened. And so we did have a fairly big drop from 14.58 down to 11. We did call around, and most of the districts throughout the state are seeing that exact same drop. Ours is a little more pronounced because our free and reduced percentage is so low compared to most school districts. Don't know the state numbers yet, but they're typically between 45 and 50% of students are on free and reduced lunch statewide. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Questions?
Thank you.
All right, Stacy, will you pull up the lovely photo? This time I just wanted to share some recent news about Dr. Claus winning his Distinguished Service Award from the Nebraska Council of School Administrators this summer. I'm sure you thought we forgot that we had to secretly find a way to surprise you in a meeting, but the award honors individuals who have rendered outstanding and unselfish service to NNCSA and who have contributed significantly to quality education at the state and local level. So on behalf of the board, congratulations.
Thank you. Now that you forget, I was hoping you never knew.
All right, that brings us to our committee reports. I believe we've had some committee meetings. The curriculum committee has met a couple times. Do you want to cover that later on in the agenda? Okay, I think we've covered most of that in our agenda this evening, so maybe we'll skip over those. And we'll go right to the spotlight report, which is our Birth to 3 program. I see Mrs. Scoots. Got a whole team of folks, but I don't want to miss somebody,
I
so.
think we're gonna do 2 of us.
Okay.
2 of us.
Okay, so will you please introduce yourself so make sure the board knows who you guys are next? Thank you.
Good evening, I am Stacy Boots, and I'm an early childhood special education teacher in the district.
And I'm Gabby Patterson. I'm the Early Intervention Services Coordinator, one of 2.
Perfect, thank you. And some other team members we have tonight, we have CJ and Gabby, our service coordinators, myself as the teacher, Alicia Corbel, speech language pathologist, our occupational therapist, Mary Beth, is not here this evening, but we also have Melissa Bruggeman, our physical therapist. 2 other important members are the teacher of students with visual impairments, Dr. Mary Noel Chamberlain, and our teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, Molly Frazier. We are part of the Early Development Network, and what's special with that is Nebraska is a birth mandate state, meaning we're required to provide special education services to children ages birth to 21. The EDN services are for kids ages birth to 3, referred to as Part C, who qualify for early intervention services according to Nebraska Rule 52. We work with families using a coaching model to help meet their child's needs. Every public school district in Nebraska has their own early intervention program. Gabby is one of our services coordinators, and she is assigned to each child under the age of 3 that's referred to through the EDN. And CJ also does that as well. Services are provided at no cost to the family, and those services are often provided in the child's natural home environment. So that could be home, sometimes in the community, at daycares. We also go to other preschools depending on their age.
Okay, so who can refer to our programs? So a lot of times those are parent referrals. We also have a really large percentage that is from physicians, clinics, hospitals. We get a lot of children straight from the NICU, kids who are medically complex, things like that. Sometimes we get childcare providers, social workers, and then we also get children referred to us through the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. So every child under the age of 3 is automatically referred to our program to be evaluated for their development. So then once a referral is made, I schedule what's called an intake meeting. So I just get all the information from the family about the child, and then I send that on to our team, and they schedule our evaluation. Typically that's Stacy and Alicia, and we do a comprehensive evaluation, a multidisciplinary team evaluation, similar to what you see in schools with IEPs. And then we also do what's called a family assessment. This is a requirement from the state, where we kind of learn about the child's routine and their daily kind of developmental needs through the lens of the family. This is just a little bit more about that.
Yes, so like she said, 2 of us usually go out to the family and start by going off what their whole day looks like. As we're listening to the family talk to us, we'll, try to come up with some functional outcomes or goals to work with that family.
And then we do what's called our final, paperwork meeting. So like I said, we do the MDT, and then we follow that with children who are qualifying for services with the individual family service plan, similar to an IEP, except we obviously provide goals and services in the home versus in the classroom. And that's all based off of the Rule 52 guidelines in Nebraska.
All right, so when we know a family is going to be receiving early intervention services, I mentioned before that we provide those in the natural environment, so home, childcare, community. We know that children learn best when they're familiar with people and their toys and things that are around them. Everyday routines and activities are used to create these learning opportunities, and the service minutes from district providers vary depending on their needs. So some students might just have speech needs, otherwise we have OT, PT, speech all going on different times. All right, so on this graph here, we know it's best to intervene as early as possible, and the Nebraska Department of Education continues to direct us to find and identify children in need. Intervening early can produce cost savings to districts and society in the long run.
This is just kind of a quick visual. It doesn't seem like a lot, but we're up 20 referrals per year, about on average from even 5 years ago. And so that's a 29% increase in our referrals, just for children 0 to 3, and really just for students who have a concern for a developmental delay. So a pretty small amount of our population, so 29%, we'll take it.
All right, this last slide we have is a family that had a really nice positive experience through the early intervention program. So if you want to just take a look at it or just see that cute little boy, he is a rock star. Yeah. Any questions for us tonight?
I would just ask, can you help us understand how long an intake? I know this information because my children benefited from the program, but I was just amazed at how much time it takes to do the intake process and the paperwork, and obviously not every student qualifies. And so can you help us understand just the time involved? Because the numbers make more of an impact to us knowing how much time it takes.
Yeah, I mean, I know my intake typically takes about an hour, sometimes a little bit less, and then the evaluations are about the same.
So that's one separate day.
Yep.
The evaluation is an hour, the family-based interview is 2 hours. Then we have an NDT, that's about an hour, and the IFSP can be an hour. And then not to mention the paperwork behind the scenes with all of that. So definitely takes a lot of time to do that.
What resources do you have? So for those students who don't qualify for the early development network, are there other resources that you can give parents, or where do you set that next?
Definitely. So that's part of my job as a services coordinator, is to kind of assess those needs, if we feel like a referral elsewhere is maybe necessary. And then it's also not a one and done. And so sometimes parents will be referred, more than one time if they continue to have concerns for their child's development. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work, Patricia.
All right, that brings us to our new business for this evening, which is the first item is for us to discuss and consider the first reading to revise several policies from the section 400 of our policy manual. This is part of our annual review process where we review certain sections of our policy manual each year to make sure we're current on all of those. And obviously, every time you read them, I think you find something new and grammatical change or whatnot. So Dr. Paz, you want to take us through both the, minor changes and some of the more substantive, and this is just the first reading this evening.
Yeah, I'll give a few highlights throughout here. So the first 13 policies listed only had grammatical changes, punctuations, capitalizations, really no substantive changes within each of those policies. And so the clean copies are provided. I did want to hit on a few that had a little bit more to them that were beyond minor. The first 5 policies that are listed there are policies that originally listed all of the protected classes as defined by the federal government with respect to discrimination. As the number of protected classes continues to evolve, they're added, subtracted, they're in courts and everything else. We look to find a more simplified version that would both make sure that they remain legally inclusive of all the protected classes, while also allowing that removal and those additions to also be covered. And so that way we didn't have any omissions, any redundancy, any of that throughout our policy. So we'll continue to do that on every policy moving forward as well. So that's the first 5 of them. Number 20 on there is the employee travel compensation. The policy committee, as they went through that, wanted to make sure that the superintendent established some expense reimbursement guidelines. So there was something in there as well on that. Also within our handbooks, our staff handbooks, it said no reimbursement for alcohol, but just wanted that restated within policy as well. Next was staff conduct with students. We had gaming systems as an inappropriate method of communication. Obviously, when this policy was written, that probably wasn't the way that 2 people communicate, but in 2024, that is the case. And so we added that as well. Let's see, I also wanted to point out just number 26, which was the employee unpaid leave. Previously, the current language didn't match up with our negotiated agreement language. Mostly it said that only one staff member could be on a sabbatical throughout the course of a year, where the negotiated agreement said 1%. At some point, 1 was probably 1%, but that's not the case anymore. And so we just matched that up to make sure that both the negotiated agreement and the policy had the same language. So nothing overly major, but a few changes in there.
I do have two questions. One on 21, and I would have to go back, but the whole policy's not here and I can pull it up, but does it indicate in that policy what appropriate communication is versus what is not?
Yes, we outline appropriate communication with all staff members. Everything should be going through our school messenger system, and so staff members know that, or school email, obviously, anything that's documented.
Okay, but we still feel like we need to outline others that are not appropriate, or we can't just say this is the only, anything outside of this is not.
Yeah, I think it's probably best in policy to make sure that we have the inappropriate ones as well. That way, if it is violated, we can very clearly point to it. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then my second one is with the policy, number 22. The terminology, I know it says you changed immediately to promptly. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, and that was another one we actually went to our attorney to try to get some advice on as well, because we actually had within a 24-hour period. And then there's also some that had immediately, and we weren't certain exactly which the best approach is, because within 24 hours, if there is, a child abuse reporting, some of it, 10 seconds is too long, Others, maybe there's through an investigation, you realize it, and then you you report it right away. And so we want to take out the 24-hour period, and then we initially talked about inserting the word immediately, but what does immediately mean exactly? And so as we worked our way through that, our attorney, he suggested we use the word promptly, because we might need to pull the car over, you might be, you need an hour to drive somewhere before you report it, whatever that is. So just a prompt reporting as opposed to immediately, and then getting rid of the 24-hour rule. Yeah.
Thank you for checking that with him, because when I read it, immediately is more clear to me than promptly.
And
like promptly is more ambiguous to me.
yeah, I think the concern was immediately also, I think we're probably semantics, promptly immediately, but what is immediate to one person might not be immediate to the next. Probably the same on prompt, but most importantly, want to get rid of within a 24-hour period, because if it wasn't quick enough, waiting 24 hours in some cases is absolutely too long. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We had a lot of really good discussions with the policy committee about each of these two. So,
Yeah, we talked about that.
yeah. Sometimes we just got down to, we better do what the attorney tells us to do.
Yeah, what?
Any other questions? This is the first reading, so certainly if things come up, please reach out to Dr. Blas and the interim before our next meeting. Okay, the next item of new business is for us to discuss, consider, and take action on district purchases. And Dr. Willingham is going to talk about a bus that became available that we certainly need, and timing was good, so.
Thank you. Yeah, Matt Willingham, Assistant Superintendent of Operations. We have budgeted for the purchase of one school bus for this year in this year's budget for growth as we continue to grow, as we continue to have programs, we continue to have students that need routes to and from school, and then the activities that we have between our middle schools and our high schools, field trips that are in the elementary schools, so on and so forth. Just consistently over time, over the years, we've budgeted for buses for that growth. We have money budgeted in for this year. In the past, usually this came January, February for the bus purchase for the year. As buses come off of lease, we're able to purchase used buses. Mr. Edens has a keen eye for finding buses with mileage that have that Cummins engine in it that we know how to service in our shop. This year, we were able to find a bus a little bit earlier than that January and February timeframe from Coachmasters. It's a Freightliner 2018 series with 47,800 miles on it. The bus was $56,500, so considerably less than what we purchased in the past. But it didn't have that underbay or that underbelly to be able to put storage in, and so for $6,000, we felt it important to include that. So we're able to use it for activities as well as a route bus. And we have some flexibility between our bus drivers and our transportation department to be able to use that both as a route bus and as an activity bus moving forward. So recommendation and request from the business department is for approval for a school bus that has been budgeted for this year. No questions I can answer.
Sorry. Knowing that we lost $5.4 million in state aid, obviously every little bit we can trim off the budget helps. We did have $100,000 originally budgeted for this, so it's $38,000 under budget.
Which is the reason we jumped on it sooner rather than later this year.
That's great.
It can be used immediately, and we're able to pick it up here soon.
It was a unanimous recommendation from Building and Finance. We discussed multiple occasions, so.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board? All right, I move for approval of the purchase of the used bus from Coach Masters at a price of $62,500.
Second?
Thank you, Steve. Jody, call the roll.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item up is for us to discuss, consider, and take action on our curriculum and personnel proposals.
Yeah, so first thing up for approval tonight would be some positions under our trigger process. This is something that we began last year and then refined again this year. As we would go through the curriculum proposal process that Mr. Feeding talked about earlier, there were a lot of times that we were asking for positions that we don't have a lot of option not to add. And so, elementaries are gonna have 30 plus kids to a classroom. Obviously departments within our high school that were just completely over flooded. And so to try to simplify that process, we began a trigger system. With that, we have some, we assume really conservative growth models, and then what those would look like within each of those schools. And the ones that, staff didn't necessarily want to waste a vote saying, yes, we need that when it's 32 kids to one in an elementary classroom. And so last year we did that. It worked out great. A couple of advantages to it beyond that are also that we could hire earlier. And so if they were approved, we're able to start advertising right away. As we've found, advertising for teachers is now a November, December, January thing, where it used to be a March, April, and May thing. And so it does allow us to kind of jump on in and get bigger pools of staff earlier, while also filling the need within the school district as well. This year, we refined the trigger process. Obviously, year one, we did some things really well, and some others that we need to continue to work on. And so one of those is at the high school. We spent a lot of time on that, trying to do it within department, and then how many students a teacher would see each day within those departments. So we refined those and feel pretty good about our new system within there as well. And so with applying all the triggers, what we'd be looking for is two lower elementary teachers, both going to Anchor Point, one middle school teacher going to Bennington South Middle School, and then one speech and language pathologist. But this isn't really an ad. And so if you remember back in July, as we assessed our numbers here for 24-25, we were short on SLPs to make sure that we were servicing kids appropriately. And so we contracted out with Just for Kids in Soliant for $115,000 this year just to get by 24-25. And so the trigger process, we added in SLPs this year. That way we can be a little bit more proactive. It showed that we needed one, which we've already contracted. And so this would be a replacement of that contract, not an addition to the budget for the upcoming year. And so all in, the four positions are $392,956. Subtract out the SLP, that would be an increase in the budget of $277,954 for the 25-26 year. Happy to answer any questions.
The process is really working well, and I think we keep discussing more ways we can use more of a trigger type system to cut down on the amount of proposals that need written and give administration flexibility. And so I think it's a good system that really is working, and I appreciate the administrators coming out and telling us about their priorities, and it's neat to see everyone working together and kind of really putting the big picture in place in the best interest of students. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you to the curriculum committee. It's a lot of time and it's hard. And I've told that to the committee and say it anywhere, it's hard. You get 40 proposals and every single one is good for kids, every single one, can be seen as a need, and trying to figure out which ones to move forward and which ones you're able to fund with the limited resources we have. It's a tough job, so I appreciate our curriculum committee and all the time and effort they put in as well to make those really tough decisions.
Thank you. No further questions, there is a motion.
I move to accept the recommendations by the curriculum committee for the 2025-26 curriculum and personnel proposal number 1 as outlined in the November 7th, 2024 curriculum committee report and pending the 2025-26 budget approval.
Thank you, Kara. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jody, call the roll.
Steve,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Kara.
Yes.
Motion passes. And that brings us to the review of our 23-24 audit report.
We got Jamie Fay here from Ian Bailey. Will take us through a quick presentation and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, welcome, Dr. Here. You have an easy trip in? I know you came in from out of town. so-
Easy trip. I came from southern Minnesota. It's not snowing yet. It was bright skies, warm weather, so it was a beautiful trip. So now I'm down here for a few days. I work with a couple of school districts in the area, so I'm happy to be here. I've already been told about some cinnamon rolls in the area that I need to check out, and some salad bars, so I think I'm set. Well, good evening. My name is Jamie Fay. I am the audit partner on the district's audit. I'm with Ideally. I've been there for about 15 years, and I was the audit partner on the district's audit as well last year. So when we're looking at tonight's presentation, we're talking about FY24, which means it is the year ended April 31st, 2024. So keep that in mind. I knew you're probably working on budgets ahead, some stuff from behind, and some current information, so that's important to note. So we're just going to step through a little bit of the audit. It is 45 pages of great information. I love it, but I understand that everyone loves numbers as much as I do. So I've got some colors and some different information for you. So when you hire Ideally to do an audit, you hire us to come in and give an opinion on if your financial statements are materially accurate or not. What that means is we come in and we test a handful of selections and trace them to backup. We recalculate a handful of items and we get them within a range that is considered material. It does not mean that we looked at every single transaction. It does not mean that we recalculated things to the penny. And I like to just kind of clarify that because I think the word audit sounds really scary and confusing. So I like to just make sure that everybody is on the same page. Quite frankly, if we were to look at every single thing and recalculate to the penny, I would be an employee of the district as well, and I would spend all of my time here, and I don't think that you want that either. So the district received a clean, unmodified audit opinion. That is what you want. That's what you've gotten in the past. The financial statements, if you read into kind of the opinion and the way of the accounting for the district reports on the modified cash basis of accounting. That is allowed by the state, and that is what most school districts in the state do report on. So that's what you'll see in some of the language if you read in the opinion. The audit procedures noted no material misstatements that were not adjusted for. So what that means is we didn't find anything that looked like it needed to be adjusted, and the district said, nah, we're good, we don't want to adjust it. That's great. There were 4 audit adjustments that came up during the procedures that we had. That is very normal. When we're doing our procedures, it's like, oh, this maybe should be here or that should be there. Worked with the district, got all of those adjustments posted, and everything was good there. So also that when it comes to our audit, we do an audit of the financial statements. So think the general fund and kind of the normal operations of the district. And then in addition, if a government spends more than $750,000 of federal money, there's a separate, we call it a single audit or a federal audit that needs to be done. That is more compliance-based and it's very specific to each program that happens. So what we do is we go through an analysis of all of the federal expenditures for the district, figure out what programs did the district spend money on. In recent years, it's been a lot of COVID funding. A lot of times child nutrition is a big one, special ed, Title I, those types of things. And based on a variety of factors that the federal government has set out, we test a certain number of programs. So this year we tested the child nutrition clusters, so the federal dollars related to food. and then some COVID-19 money related to ESSER. And between those two, we tested about 58.3% of the programs were made up by those two programs. So we had, in that whole process, we came out with an unmodified opinion as well, so a clean unmodified opinion. Now, on the end of the audit, the first question I always get is, okay, we got a good opinion, what do you need to tell me? What are my findings? So here's the findings. The financial statements had two significant deficiencies, which don't rise to the level of what we call material weaknesses, but they're significant enough, we just need to bring them to attention. The first one is segregation of duties, and the second one is called preparation of financial statements, including schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Those two findings are very common in most districts that I work with, and I work nationwide. What that means is a little bit smaller of a district, and we help with some of that information. We help with getting the financial statements prepared. We write that document based on information from the district and just assist with that. And the reason that is so common in governments, I work with cities, schools, counties, kind of a variety of governments. The reason that is so common is because the accounting requirements are getting more and more complex, and there is a shortage of accounting professionals. So those two together just lead to, hey, we just need some assistance in preparing this information. These do not exclude you from getting that unmodified opinion that we talked about, so really no big concerns there. If we had any findings on the federal audit or anything really else that came up, we would have noted that here. So it's just those two items. So now looking at just a little bit of numbers, I'm putting them in some colors for you. One of the things that I just like to show in my presentations that a lot of my boards find useful is average daily membership. So think a way to look at student counts. So this is just for the past 5 years. You can see where the district's been compared to where you're at. And I know I've already heard some conversations about some projections that you've got. Usually this is not a surprise, but I just like to point it out and showing, hey, these numbers really do drive a lot of times the revenue of districts and the expenditures. So it's just good to have this kind of in the back of your mind as we go through some of this information. So then we're going to talk about the general fund. So the general fund is kind of the main fund of the district, and kind of those main operations that you have. And when we're talking about the financial statements, the first thing that we try to look at is the fund balance. So a lot of times we'll get the question, well, why do we need a fund balance? What does that even result in? So the reasons you want a positive fund balance are it contributes to a favorable bond rating. So if you're going to go out and take out some debt, you get a better interest rate if you get a favorable bond rating. It produces some investment income and working capital if you do have a little bit of fund balance sitting there that the district can rely on. And then third, and I would argue most important, especially in the wake of a pandemic, global pandemic that we all just went through, is that it offers a little bit of a cushion for unexpected shortfalls in whether it be revenues or some unexpected expenditures that need to happen. So fund balance, if we take a look at the next slide, this is the total fund balance for the general fund for the past 5 years. Just showing where you are and where you've been. There's not necessarily a quote unquote right answer here. This is just so you can see, hey, this is where we are. Through our audit procedures, we do some current year to prior year analysis to say, hey, this looks like it's different than both the budget and what you did last year. Can you help me understand why? And in all of those procedures, if there were questions in there that we didn't get answered that rise to the level of materiality, we would be reporting those. So when you look at some of the fluctuations here, we've done procedures on the revenues and expenditures to make sure that, yep, these look good. So there's about a $2.8 million increase in the general fund from 2023 to 2024. So then looking at that same type of information, we're going to look at a couple other funds of the district. So the first one is the bond fund. For those that don't know a lot about the different funds of the district, very high level, the bond fund, really the purpose of that fund is to account for the taxes levied and the other revenues that are earmarked for the retirement of bond indebtedness, which means basically your debt. What money do you have coming in to pay for your debt? These funds a lot of times operate in the way that you levy and you kind of build this, and then a lot of times you'll pay off debt and you'll kind of go that way. So you have about a $1.5 million increase in here. And this really ebbs and flows just based on where you're at in the bond cycle. If you've got big payoffs coming, or if you just had a big payoff, or if you just had a big bond that came through. The next fund that we'll look at is the special building fund. So this one is very specific to future building and equipment purchases. So this one, again, also ebbs and flows, just strictly based on what's happening in the district. If you have big projects coming, if you just had a big project, it can really jump up or down. And there was only about a $323,000 decrease in this fund from the 23 to 24, so pretty small. I would argue that it's pretty much consistent from year to year. The next one we're gonna look at is the Qualified Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund. Basically, that is for the obligations of these qualified capital purchase bonds. And there was about a $3.7 million decrease in this fund this year. There was a $4.2 million payoff of some 2011 issuances that happened. So that explains basically the drop there. And this one will operate very similar to the other one that we were explaining with the bonds, where you kind of build it up and then you pay it off, and depending on how those life cycles of the debt works is how this one works. And with that, I will take any questions that you have for me.
I got a quick question. So if we go back to the fund balance on the general fund for the last 5 years. So help me understand, on the 2024, we've increased 1.5 million, correct? I think it was something like that.
2.8.
2.8.
Yep.
Okay, so why would that be? Why would we have more money with more students and more expenditures in that particular fund?
So there can be a variety of reasons, and one of the places that I like to look is the budget to actual. So it would be in the actual financial statements. The budgeted change in fund balance was a projected deficit of 1.3 million, and the actual was about a $2.8 million increase. And if you look specifically, there were more revenues that came in. Specifically, it looks like some state aid appropriations in there.
So, you might answer.
Yeah, go for it.
So if you remember back to last year, not this school year, the previous school year, we budgeted over a 3-year period. And so we were projecting significantly higher revenues in '24, knowing that $5.4 million decrease in state aid was gonna come in '25. And so I think as a time at that board, the board at that time decided we didn't want to yo-yo the levy up and down. Let's drop it as far as we possibly can to try to balance the 3 years as opposed to a down 10, up 10 situation. And so we were able to lower the levy between the Houston and the general fund by 6.8 cents last year. But knowing we were going to have a little too much revenue this year, but we're going to have to spend the reserves the following year just to make ends meet. So that's why we budget over the 3-year period. You'll see some awkward, movements between your reserves for that reason.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Why didn't you know that, Amy?
I know.
Right?
I just want to express my appreciation to the district. As auditors, we come in, and I know not everybody loves it when we do, we kind of shake things up. But the district was great to work with. We got everything filed and signed, sealed, and delivered much in front of the deadline, so we appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wanted to publicly thank Michael Tice as well for all of his work. Obviously, year 2 of doing this, put in a lot of time and effort, and made the whole process go smooth as well. So thank him for all of his efforts.
Thank you, Michael. All right, our next item is for us to discuss, consider, and take action on our lobbyist contract with Kelly Plucker LLC. Dr. Claus, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so Bennington Public Schools engaged with Kelly Plucker for about a decade now. During that time, Julia Plucker has been our liaison between Kelly Plucker and ourselves. We're often utilizing her services down at the unicameral lobbying with senators on behalf of us, whether that comes for increases in state aid or any other potential legislation that would impact us. One thing that's really appreciated is just her constant presence in the rotunda. Obviously, we don't have the staffing to be there every single day and have those conversations. Obviously we are active. We are constantly working with our legislators and the governor's office, and Bennington is pretty darn involved, but we can't sit there in the rotunda day over day and day after day. And so Julia does that for us, does an excellent job. Been very happy with the services that she's provided. If we did not do this, we'd have to make two choices at that point. We could either reduce our engagement, or we have to assign those responsibilities to somebody. And so Obviously, that's hard in a district that we already struggle just with the quantity of staff. And so her previous contract was for $27,000 per year. The proposed contract is a 2.96% increase to $27,800 per year. And it would be a 2-year agreement, so we got the long session and the short session, and so she would stay through each of those, and then we can look at that again. I did do some comparisons around the metro. Almost every district has a lobbyist of some kind. Those typically range from anywhere from about $30,000 to $65,000, so we do feel like we have pretty good value here with a really solid lobbyist.
Thank you, Dr. Claus. Is there any questions from the board on the contract?
What's the 27.8 plus fees?
There's like printing. Oh, and we also pay for, you have to register to be a lobbyist, a couple $100. I don't know exactly the number is, and we pay that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we always have, so that's not a new expense. I just put that in there.
Do we have like a stipend increase too? So like if they're gonna take somebody out to dinner or something like that, or did she?
We do not provide anything on that. Nope.
All right, I move that we approve a tier contract with Kelly Plucker LLC to secure the lobbying services of Julia Plucker for the 25-26 legislative sessions as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kara. Jody, call the roll.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes. Motion passes. And that brings us to our final item of the night, which is an executive session to discuss certificated staff negotiations. As a note to those in the room, we do not intend for any sort of action to be taken following the session. And I do want to highlight a couple of upcoming dates and times before we have a motion to go into session. Our next regular meeting is December 9th at 6 p.m. here in the district office. And we do have a series of committee meetings before that meeting. And then last reminder to the board that our NASB State Education Conference is coming up here at the end of November. So if you want to go, please let Jody know. We'd love to have you attend. It's a learning opportunity for all of us. All right, I move that we enter into a closed session for the purpose of holding a strategy session regarding collective bargaining as an executive session is fully necessary for the protection of the public interest.
Second.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jody, call the roll.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.